Hello everyone, I am Prem Ansh Sinha, Editor-in-Chief of Ramjas Political Review. For this episode of our Global Village, we have with us Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal. He has been a Rhodes Scholar, he has been he is a member of the EAC to the Prime Minister of India, and he has written a lot of books based on history and economics as well. So, Mr. Sanyal, my very first question to you is about that I have been through a lot of your works and in-person events and lectures as well, and the most distinguishing feature has been your emphasis on the ancient Indian political philosophy and various other things aligned to it. But if I'm allowed to ask you, there has been a certain gap in the contemporary times with respect to this particular area. What do you think has caused this limitation that we do not have any contemporary literature that could interpret this whole idea very well?
So, first of all, thanks for coming to the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. So, welcome. So, Prem, the problem is that we have in our discourse and our academia, we've been so totally taken over by Western thought and lineages of thought that we have ended up forgetting that we have our own indigenous systems. I'm not necessarily saying that our systems are better than somebody else's, but we have our own way of thinking about the world with fairly deep roots, and many of those lineages of thought have had huge impact on the rest of the world, whether it's in mathematics or in medicine and surgery or in many other areas, or the game of chess, whatever it is. So this is also true in the universe of economics, political thought, thinking about governance and so on. And we are arguably the oldest living civilization in the world. And in this long period of thought, long period of time, not surprisingly, many empires have risen and fallen. Many people have thought about how to govern better. So the question is, where is this lineage of thought written about and discussed? Now, people will randomly pull out the Arthashastra by Kautilya and basically talk about it. But the point is that Arthashastra itself clearly mentions that there were many thinkers before Kautilya. And there were also many thinkers after Kautilya. But we barely mention any of them. And of course, it comes all the way to modern times. So the point here is that we have been thinking about governance type issues for a very long time. It reflects in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana as well. But even the things that you hear, in the end, the Ramayana and Mahabharata are not textbooks on governance. So they do have discussions, but they have other concerns. But there were actually properly, fully formulated lineages or traditions of thinking of governance that have existed in India for a very long time, including going, before Kautilya.
Right, sir. Sir, and if I may ask you, why do you think we lack a good number of authors or academics writing on this particular area in contemporary times?
You should ask the academics. I have no idea. I have written about it myself, right. And my interest in this matter is this. Just there are lots of interesting things that you can understand by reading Kautilya. Now, Kautilya himself mentions, for example, that if you literally, the beginning of the book, he starts by saying that salutations to the great rishis Shukra and Brihaspati. And in the text, in the first section, he then mentions that there are many lineages of thought that they are in the world that already exist. And then he explains what the differences are between them and where he fits in.
So if I'm allowed to interject, do you not think that there is too much emphasis on Kautilya's Arthashastra?
No, it is. First of all, it's unhealthy because by emphasizing just that, you do not know what the context in which, what are the arguments he was having, what is the context in which he's dealing with. So for example, just so that you know, what was the school of Brihaspati and what was the school of Shukra? Who are these people and what was their arguments?
Right.
So Shukra, who was also the guru of the Asuras, he belonged to the school of thought where Dandaniti is the most important, i.e. rule of law. So his point was that if you want to avoid Matsya Nyaya, which is the law of the fish, which is, anarchy, then a civilization requires to have rule of law. So his thinking of governance was entirely driven by a legalist school. Okay, so there are a set of rules, and governance is about making sure those rules are good rules and then imposing those rules. Okay.
Right.
Now there are other people may say, sorry, this is too limited. You also need government intervention. Okay, that's Varta. That is what Brihaspati says. You need, particularly for economic policies, you need somebody thinking about encouraging industry. You need to think a little bit about how to build infrastructure, all these kinds of policy issues. So that is Varta. Okay. Then Kautilya says, no, this is not good enough. You also need to have political philosophy. You need to think about cultural context. So he says, look, you need to think about Anvikshiki, about Tri. Anvikshiki is a philosophy. Today we have philosophies. Are you a libertarian? Are you socialist? Are you whatever? So they provide a framework of thinking about laws. So the laws don't exist in vacuum. To decide what vacuum, you need a philosophy. To decide what laws, what policies, you need some philosophy of the world. So you need to also study Anvikshiki and Tri. Tri is the cultural context. So even if you agree on policy, laws and philosophy, the cultural context in which you apply them also matters. So Kautilya says, you need to learn all of these things. You need to have a view on how to make laws, you need on policy, you need an economic philosophy of some sort, or a general philosophy, not just economic, on governance, you need a philosophical frame, and then you need to know which cultural context in which you're applying all of this. All of these are important.
Right.
Okay? So the Brihaspati school, which predates, it says, okay, yes, I agree with Shukra, need of law, but we also need policy. Manu says, we also, in addition, require cultural context. That's Manu's school. And then, of course, Kautilya himself says you need all four. So you can see, and then, by the way, it doesn't end with Kautilya. There are later scholars like Kamandak.
Yes.
Okay, so Kautilya is functioning in the Mauryan period. He is one of the founders, better known as Chanakya as well. He is one of the founders of the Mauryan Empire, along with Chandragupta Maurya. And we don't know the extent to which his book of theory was actually used to run the empire. Presumably some of it did inform his ideas of governance in practical terms. But then, many centuries later, you have Kamandak, who is in the Gupta period.
Right.
An important thing to understand is that not everybody agrees on everything. So, for example, Kautilya discusses many things in his book which he discusses that I disagree with so and so. So, for example, Kautilya was against prohibition.
Right.
He was against banning many things we consider social bads. Okay, he was much more into either taxing them or regulating them.
Okay.
So there is a section on regulating prostitution. He has an entire section on taxing and regulating alcohol.
Right.
So he would have not have approved a prohibition, for example, because he would have said, one, you're losing a source of income, and you are also people are anyway going to do all of these things. So you might as well regulate them in some sensible fashion. So similarly, he was not a welfarist.
Right.
He was extremely suspicious of government officials.
Right.
Okay, so you read very often, those who don't read Kautilya seriously and just flick through, they will tell you, oh, he encouraged spying and all that. Who are these spies spying on? Either they are spying on foreign powers,
Okay.
or more, they are spying on government officials. Because Kautilya says that just like a fish swimming in the water, you can't tell how much water it is drinking. In the same way, you cannot tell how much money a government official is skimming.
Right.
And he continuously talks about this, about the need for retaining strict control over government officials. Okay, so he is a big believer in a strong but a limited state.
So if I may ask you here, so you write in most of your writings that you believe that India should be a Kautilyan republic instead of an Ashokan republic.
Yes.
So can you please expand on that? Do you think that it is realistically possible in a
No, I'll tell you what they are. You decide.
democracy like India?
You decide whether it's a good idea or bad idea. I'll tell you what the Kautilyan republic would be. First of all, Kautilya was not a libertarian, so he believed in a state, in a strong state. He just was suspicious of government officials getting involved in too many things.
Right.
So, a Kautilyan state will not have a sense of humor about things like internal and external security, certain kinds of infrastructure being built out, all those kinds of things. Government is clearly there. However, he would be very, very suspicious of expanding the state in the name of welfareism. So the state does have some role to play in certain kinds of welfare, like for example, helping people after a natural disaster.
Okay.
Now that he would consider as being a legitimate role of the state. But he would be very, very suspicious of a nanny state. Okay? Because his view would be that the moment you allow the government to expand there, the officials are
How do you define a nanny state, sir?
A state where everything you do, the state is telling you what to do.
Okay.
So basically, every kind of dole, some kind of a freebies.
Right.
Clearly stuff that Chanakya would have been extremely suspicious of.
So how do you maintain that balance in federalism in a Kautilyan state?
So obviously, he's making his case. It's a book of theory.
Right.
So the point being made is that a Kautilyan state would be very clear that the state exists for doing certain things. It's a contract with the citizens,
right.
And the state does not have any business crossing that threshold, which is very, very different from how, for example, today's Indian state has become. Although even this is a shrunk version of what it used to be. So the state otherwise would like to tell you this is good for you, that is bad for you.
Right.
It will try and sort of control people's lives and nanny them. Whereas Kautilya would have found that extremely uncomfortable. And unfortunately, just 2 generations after him, so in his grand kids, Ashoka turned up, is a completely opposite view. So he starts by saying that I am trusting my state, my people,
right.
to the care of my Rajukas and Dharma Mahamantas, who will look after the people in the same way that a mother hands over her child to a wet nurse.
Right.
I mean, it's literally an any state.
Right, sir.
Okay, and basically the idea is, and then you read the Ashoka's edicts. He is going on about, you should not eat so and so food on so and so day. You need to, you shall not castrate a bull on so and so day of Chaturmasi and so on day of Tisa. Now, Kautilya would have been shocked. You say, how does the bull care which day he is getting castrated?
Right.
Right. So the point is that he would have said, why are you giving these powers to Dharma Mahamantas? I mean, if you had to translate it to modern terms, Dharma Mahamanta is a religious police.
Right.
It's going around teaching people to love their parents. I love my parent or don't love my parent.
Right.
What is a government official getting involved in?
Right.
Right. So you see the interference. Now you come to modern times and you then end up with this overextended Nehruvian state. Okay, the Nehruvian state likes telling people what they shouldn't do.
Right.
Okay, it's one thing, it's okay to come up to the point where, wearing safety belts maybe, it's up to that point, it's okay.
Right.
Those kinds of rules are fine, traffic rules. But should it get involved in,
what you eat, what you wear,
or for that matter, building codes? Okay,
right.
If you look at our building codes, you'll be shocked. It tells you exactly how big your post room should be,
right.
or your prayer room should be.
Okay.
How do you care? I mean, building code should care whether or not my building stays up.
Right, sir.
Safety. Okay. After that, I want a large prayer room or I want a small prayer room. What's your problem?
Right, sir. So there is another, you have written a book on the Indian Ocean and the maritime history of the Indian Ocean, and I have a question pertaining to that. Former India's ambassador to China, Mr. K.M. Panikar, in his very famous book India and the Indian Ocean, he writes that how India has always been a seafaring nation, but this deteriorated during the Mughal period, and the British actually did not care about it because the entire Indian Ocean was their playground or the lakes. So with the Chinese ambition of the strings of pearls, where they are wishing to establish the range of ports and various other places for trade and commerce, and even there is a military base in Djibouti. So, do you think how is India responding to it? Is this a neglect of the Indian Ocean once again, or are we?
No, I mean for the very first time we are finally thinking of the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
I mean all of this has been. We have not controlled the Indian Ocean for hundreds of years, and nobody seemed to care.
Okay.
The Navy was really a stepchild of the military also till very recently.
Right.
I mean, in 1971 they did play a role, but before that the other two wars they didn't. And by and large it was the smallest of our armed forces. Similarly, if you look at the merchant navy and so on,
Right, sir.
it's very, very small. I mean, something like 90% of all our goods are carried by foreign.
You're trying to say we are catching up with the pace.
No. So we never mind China.
Okay.
We are playing below our size. We are punching well below our weight.
Right.
Even ignoring China.
Okay.
So we need to invest in a merchant fleet. We need to invest in navy. We need to invest in big ports. But the good news is, for the first time, we are beginning to do this. So just now, major big port has been announced in Badhavan, just north of Mumbai.
Okay.
It will be India's largest port, and for the first time, we are thinking in terms of a Chinese scale port. Okay. For the first time, you are seeing Indian Navy operating, for example, off the coast of Somalia and Yemen. And to the extent the Red Sea is functioning at all is because of Indian Navy's operations.
So what you're trying to say, sir, is that when we are thinking of the Indian Ocean, when we are thinking of a strategy in security, we should be thinking independent of what China is doing? We should
not independently, but what I'm trying to say is that we can begin worrying about China only after we have punched at least to our own weight.
Okay, that's
okay. We don't need China to understand that.
Right.
We need to have more ships in the merchant navy.
Absolutely.
That more of our containers need to be owned by Indian, container owners and shipping lines. So we need to build our shipping capabilities irrespective of China.
Okay.
Now, additionally, you also have to worry about China. But let's get to the point where we are at least punching our own weight.
Definitely, sir. So you have been one of the strongest advocates for rewriting history. So what do you think is the right approach to it? Given that, let's say that if someone, I think Dr. Meenakshi Jain wrote a certain aspect of NCRT history in 2000 during the Vajpayee era, but it got removed when the UPA came to the power again. So what do you think?
So one of the major problems is history writing in many areas, social sciences also. Unfortunately, worldwide has happened, but also has happened in India. It's been basically been taken over by people of a certain ideology.
Right.
And they have ethnically cleansed out of academia pretty much anybody who didn't agree with them. Okay. So till the 1950s, you had multiple views of history, and you had people like R.C. Majumdar and so on. They were all being, literally evicted out of the architecture of our academic thinking.
Right.
And of course, they didn't just happen in history writing. It happened in economics, it happened in sociology, and to some extent has happened worldwide.
Right, sir.
That certain left-leaning ideology has basically captured all discussions of academia. Now, if you want to build an alternative, you have to, unfortunately, go back, or fortunately maybe, go back and relook at the primary evidence. There is no escaping going around the primary evidence, and history, as any other subject, has got lots of new evidence keeps appearing.
Absolutely.
So you have to keep updating this stuff. Unfortunately, we are still stuck with absurd colonial era ideas, which are then perpetuated by these left-wing Marxist historians
for
their own agendas. So they have created and skewed a lot of the conversation in a particular way. So you need people who start afresh, look at primary evidence, and are able to interpret. I'll just give you one example. Say the entire project of the Nehruvian left. So there are different kinds of left have done different kinds of distortions.
Right.
The Nehruvian left's distortion is that they edited out deliberately out of the conversation the role played by the violent revolution against the British.
Yeah.
So only the one branch, not even all branches, but one branch of the Congress party is given credit for giving us independence.
Right.
But it was just one branch of the Congress. There were many others. There were people within the Congress, people outside the Congress, and particularly the role of the revolutionaries. It was slowly and slyly edited out.
Right, sir.
Yeah, and so till we reached a point where you got the impression that, there were, there were the occasional something that maybe a Bhagat Singh did or Subhash Bose did, but it didn't really add up to very much, and they didn't know each other. It was a random acts of something. Totally wrong. It was a well-organized movement. All these people knew each other.
They were linked to each other.
Yeah, and they were trying to do something. They had clear views. They had a literature. They had all kinds of, and a lot of the conversation was driven by what these people were doing.
I think I was surprised when I saw that the first War of Independence by V.D. Savarkar had been reprinted again and again by various people like
right up to
Bhagat
Singh also.
and
All of these people are reading all of this, and look at the few people who have survived that conversation are also very instructive.
Right.
So because the communists, for example, had very little role in our freedom struggle, they went and plucked Bhagat Singh out of the revolutionary movement, and so you only had Bhagat Singh.
Okay.
Now, Bhagat Singh was actually hanged with two other people.
Sukhdev and
Yeah. So why don't we hear so much about Sukhdev and Rajguru? They were hanged on the same day for exactly the same reason. Right? But you only have Bhagat Singh. Why? Because of all these revolutionaries, he alone
writing on communism
was a communist.
Right.
And then later on you get the impression that maybe all these revolutionaries were communists. No, They were not. I mean, today you would actually call them Hindu nationalists, right? Term didn't exist then. But
right.
Point of the matter is, Rajguru would be today branded a Hindu nationalist.
But so when we see that, like you're claiming that Nehruvian historians actually distorted the history.
No, they deliberately did it.
They deliberately did it.
So because they wanted to play up one branch of the Congress, and of course culminating in Nehru himself.
But then we see, you say that Bhagat Singh was actually plucked out of it. But when we read A Modern History of India by Bipin Chandra, we see that he terms Bhagat Singh as a revolutionary terrorist. And this
So first of all, pull one person out.
Okay.
Isolate him from the wider movement. Okay, so that only this guy is the one who is built up. And then he called revolutionary terrorist, but usko bhi diminish kar do. You see, and you get no sense that there is a wider movement. What is their agenda? How many people are there? What are they saying? What is their literature? You get no sense of it. You see. And so you get the impression that basically Gandhiji gently requested the British to leave and they politely left.
Right.
This is basically what the impression you will get.
So what do you think is the right way to go about rewriting?
No, just go and look at the original texts and look at the newspapers of that time, look at the conversations of that time. This is recent history. Some people alive even today have witnessed that history. There's still some people alive.
Right, sir.
Okay, this is not long time ago I have to dig up some archaeological site in Harappa and figure it out. This is all there. Today's history. And look at the way it has been distorted. And in fact, what is shocking is how it deliberately tried to erase it.
Right, sir.
So, cellular jail is a sacred site. It was almost entirely pulled down. The little bit of it that you today see is what was left that didn't somehow get demolished because there was a lot of protests against it. But in other places, the protests happened and they demolished it completely, like Mamsi. Mamsi is built on the site of the Delhi jail.
Sir, I have another question for you. There is some evidences doing rounds on social media that, of course, there are primary evidences that there was a massacre of Chitpavan Brahmins after the assassination of M.K. Gandhi. So how do you think?
And there are people alive who witnessed it.
Right. And so how do you
their
think
victims are still alive.
So how do you think these things went out of the mainstream? How did
it was clearly you should go and ask those who edited them out.
Okay.
Why don't we talk about it? We at least talk about the 1984 Sikh riots.
Right.
why don't we talk about the Brahmin riots of Maharashtra of 1948, which were just as violent, just as many people got killed, tens of thousands of houses got burned down, women got raped, all kinds of nasty things happened. We don't talk about it at all.
So,
Literal silence.
But I think, sir, that is very convenient for the students as well, given why would a student in academia who's wishing to pursue a career in, let's say, academia would want to take this particular side?
That's why the search for truth is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if academia is not about the search for truth, but about...
I mean, there are greater benefits of being on the left. I've heard it from my...
No, so it's basically a part of citation rackets where they give each other promotions and awards.
Right, sir.
So those citation rackets are the problem. So the knowledge... And now, unfortunately, this citation racket culture has now spread to the natural sciences also.
Okay.
So, and this is not an Indian problem as well. This is globally happening, right? If you do not, subscribe to the view that there is no biological difference between a man and a woman, you can get into trouble in American academia.
Right, sir. So, how do you think, what incentive would a person get actually? Because there's no conservative movement actually.
So then maybe you should create one. But the point of the matter is people have to at least speak up against absurdity.
Absolutely, sir.
So, I mean, if they are careerists who want to do it, fine, then, that's their thing. But if the point is to, if you're saying academia is about pushing the realm of knowledge, then let's be clear that people have to stand up and speak the truth. If you want to just be a careerist, do your PhD, do your postdoc, and quote each other's
but in contemporary times, even in the contemporary times,
let's not do it.
Right, sir. Even in the contemporary times, we see that when authors like Arun Shourie tried writing on these things, they were actually sidelined later in the career.
Of course, he faced a lot of problems, but he stood up. No, he stood up. So that's why it requires people with some courage.
Right, sir.
You see, that's why you need people who will stand up to rubbish and bullshit. So the problem is that, the first point is to agree that a large part of what is taught in universities is nonsense, particularly in the social sciences.
Right, sir. I have two more.
I mean, the economics we study, for example, subject
right, sir.
I actually work in. I happen to have been in university at the time that the Berlin Wall fell,
right, sir.
And our own economy collapsed, and we had to do liberalization and reforms. Now, think about the sheer absurdity that I was faced by. That I was writing in the classroom. I was being taught how wonderfully successful 5-year plans were. Nationalization was such a wonderful idea. Right. Meanwhile, the newspaper I could read, the whole place was collapsing. Right. Manmohan Singh stood there and announced that we are finally going to liberalize the economy.
I think that's
so. First of all, the absurdity. But what is even more absurd is now 30 years later, the liberalized system has clearly outperformed the pre-liberalization world.
Right, sir.
Right. There's no comparison in the two worlds. Right. If you don't agree with me, go and look at Shastri Bhavan, great construction of that period of time. Wander around the hall, the corridors of Shastri Bhavan, you will understand what socialism is.
Right, the brutalist architecture, that is.
Not the brutalist architecture, the general stench that you will see, the whole mindset. Now, we all know that 30 years of liberalization has been good for India. Yet in your textbooks in economics, you read them. Even today, you will hear substantial amounts of it as how wonderful the 5-year plans were. I'm sorry, I lived through those 5-year plans. They were rubbish. They were unbelievable corruption. And much of the corruption that happens even today is because of rules, regulations written during that period.
Right, sir. So I have I had 2 questions, but I think it would not be appropriate for this recording, so perhaps I can ask you after the same. And the last question is that there is a very common lament when it comes to students of history and political science that a lot of historiography and even archaeological discoveries were made during the period of during the British period, and we couldn't achieve any remarkable feat post-independence.
So the good news is that recent times we have begun to finally do archaeology again.
Right.
So up to the 50s, interestingly, we were doing some new archaeology.
Right.
There are people like B.B. Lal, for example, who went and dug up all the Mahabharata sites, for example. And then it was thought that people like B.B. Lal were digging up inconvenient things. So the ASI's budgets were slashed and all that. Recently, last few years, we have begun to again go back to archaeology, put in some more money into these things, and some things are happening.
Right.
So, for example, you had Rakhi Gadis being dug.
Right.
We had the Sanauli digs where you finally found those chariots.
Right.
Similarly, Humayun's tomb, look at how beautifully it's been
Right.
now done up. There's now a really nice museum. Please go and
Right.
visit it at Humayun's tomb. So some effort is being put into all of this
Right.
again, and we are going to convert the North Block and South Block into the National Museum.
I think this thing was taken off, if I'm not wrong, the museum thing.
No, they have been converted to
They are being converted. Oh,
Yes.
okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Sanyal.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure to meet you.